Hi, I'm Jenny Kurtzev with the Power of the Patient Project, and today my guest is Dr. Andrew Lamb. Andrew Lamb is a retinal specialist and the award-winning author of three books. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and he's even been a featured commentator on PBS News Hour and many other outlets like New England Public Radio. Born in Philadelphia and raised in Central Illinois, he graduated summa cum laude in history from Yale University, where he studied military history and U.S. East Asian relations. He then attended medical school at the University of Pennsylvania, followed by specialty training in ophthalmology and retina surgery at the Wells Eye Hospital in Philadelphia, where he also served as the chief resident. Welcome, Dr. Lamb.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you do these programs to help educate patients. I am a retina surgeon, which means I'm probably the most specialized doctor that you might ever find. So when I was in medical school, I thought going into ophthalmology, which is study of the eyes, was specialized. But now I actually only work on the neural tissue in the back of the eye, which is called the retina. So it's extremely specialized. So basically, I'm an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist, the kind you really don't want to have to see, to be honest, because that means you have something pretty serious or sight threatening, often like macular degeneration or retinal detachment. But I love what I do, and I love taking care of patients. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you.
Thank you. So we're going to start on my first question. So you're an author of three books, two being novels and the third being a book that explains your medical work. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your two novels? And as a busy doctor, what makes you enjoy writing novels?
Well, thanks. That's a nice question to get. I think if you told me that I would be a writer someday when I was in high school or even in college, I would be shocked. It wasn't something I ever really aspired to do. I was always very interested in medicine. I loved helping people and I wanted to have patient interaction. So I went to college. I majored in history because I love history, but I went to medical school and residency and fellowship for retina surgery. But all along, I kind of always felt it was a shame that I never really used all the knowledge I had gained in studying in college. I focused a lot on American history and World War II history, and I had studied and focused on researching World War II in China, and what all the American soldiers did and advisors did there during the war. And it seemed to me that that was the part of World War II that really hadn't been explored as much. It's very hard to find an unmined aspect of World War II at this point, but that was one where I felt like it'd be great if people knew more about it. And I remember the moment when I thought I might be able to write a book, or I got the idea. I was in residency in the emergency room, and it was late. It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was quieting down. So I was just sitting there at the desk, but I couldn't leave because I had to be there. And I was half like in a dazed state, and I just thought to myself, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could like convey this knowledge that I have about World War II in China? But I didn't have time to write a nonfiction book because that would require, reading hundreds of books, which I didn't have time to not only read. You'd have to kind of interview scores of veterans. You'd have to travel to China, do research on the ground. So I didn't have time to do that. But I thought to myself, maybe I'd watched a World War II movie around that time. I thought to myself, what if I just wrote a novel, like a historical novel, which you could make very exciting, action-packed, romantic, dramatic, and use that as a way to convey the history that I think I wanted to tell people about. And actually, after I started doing it, I realized this is a great way to do it because you can reach a group of people who wouldn't necessarily think they're interested in military history or World War II history. A group of people who wouldn't be necessarily the kind who would jump and buy a nonfiction book. You'd reach a whole bunch of people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to it. And that book was called Two Sons of China, and it was a very gratifying thing. It did well. It won several awards, some awards, one of which was the Ford Review's Book of the Year in 2014, which was very nice to get. And so I kind of like this idea of highlighting aspects of American history that aren't really that well known. And my most recent book is a novel called Repentance, which it was historically based on the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was a group of Japanese Americans who fought heroically in Europe, while some of them had families incarcerated in internment camps like Manzanar at home. So they were actually the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. So that's another awesome story that I appreciate people knowing about.
No, I definitely hope our readers get to read your books. They seem like they're very lively and very lovely to read. As for the next question, so this is more on your medical field, but we all tend to take care of our eyes and take them for granted. But eye surgery sometimes is required by patients at any age, young and old. I know that a patient facing eye surgery needs might need to find a good surgeon. In
Mhm.
terms of choosing the best surgeon, what are some of the criteria you suggest our patients search for?
That's a good question. I know that's on the minds of a lot of people. The first thing I would say is, I think that we can have a lot of confidence here in the United States about the quality of the training of ophthalmologists. It's extremely standardized, the training. It's very regimented. There's a multitude of exams and uh, training protocols and standards that you have to meet. There's oral exams. It's a very rigorous thing. It takes many, many years. So I think we have a very well-trained ophthalmology force, and the vast majority of ophthalmologists are extremely good. But I think it's very important for people to know first the difference between optometrists and ophthalmologists, because that's very confusing to people. Um, Optometrists are frontline eye care providers. They're excellent and adept at prescribing glasses, and they're very good at kind of evaluating an initial problem and seeing if it rises to the level that would require the help of an ophthalmologist. Now, an ophthalmologist is a medical doctor who went to medical school, and he or she is a surgeon. So these are the people who are doing cataract surgery, glaucoma surgery, LASIK, and things like that. Okay, so um, luckily, there's a lot of good ophthalmologists in practically every area of the country that are very good. So if you're trying to find one, there's probably a few good ways. The first effective way is to honestly trust the primary care provider or optometrist or eye doctor who's referring you to the eye surgeon. These you can literally ask them like, who would you go to for your own eye or your family's eyes? Because these people have usually been in the area for many years. They kind of know the lay of the land, who's good, who has the fewest complications, who has the best reputation. And I think that they have no interest. Their interests are aligned with you. They want you to have a good outcome. They wouldn't want to send you to somebody who has a lot of complications or they can't trust. So that's probably the most important factor, I think, in trusting who you go to. Other things you could do are, of course, if you have a family or friend who had a good experience with an ophthalmologist, particularly for cataract surgery, that can be a good sign. Sometimes people rely on or check out online reviews. I think you always have to take online reviews with a grain of salt. Sometimes the people who are most likely to take the time to leave a review are the ones who maybe have an axe to grind, for example. So you have to definitely kind of be careful about what they're saying. But I think that if you find a doctor who has more negative than positive reviews, then you might want to take a close look at what's being said and if those criticisms are valid. And the same, of course, goes for positive reviews as well.
You know, I definitely like agree with that. I believe a lot of people that we're going to watch these definitely are going to agree with that. Aside from your two novels, your third book is titled Saving Sight. Can you tell us why you wrote the book and what patients can learn from reading it?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, Saving Sight is near and dear to my heart. It is a book that I wrote for patients and for the general public to give them an idea of what it's like to be an ophthalmologist or a surgeon trying to save sight. Um, so the idea for that book was kind of interesting. I'd already written my first novel, and when you've written a book and you have an agent, you basically spend a lot of time thinking about what else you could write books about. And I had been a very historically minded resident. I was very interested in who had developed the techniques we use as eye surgeons and how they'd come about. And as I learned more and more about the amazing innovators, most of them anonymous people who practically no one, a lot of the general public doesn't know much about, I was blown away. All of their stories were like Hollywood blockbuster movies. They had courage, defeat, serendipity, perseverance. And I was amazed at how great they were and I'm amazed that so few people knew about them. So I thought that more people should. So I remember going to my agent and I said, I've got this idea for a great book. It's about ophthalmology's heroes. And then nothing really happened. She wasn't really that interested. And I asked her why. She said she didn't think that was likely to work. And she basically thought that there wasn't much of a market for an ophthalmological nonfiction book, like a book about ophthalmology's history. So I was a bit crestfallen, of course, but when you think about it, of course, I think she was pretty much right. They're not interested in books that aren't going to sell well. And so, but I didn't give up. I said, what if I thought to myself, what if I blended that history that I wanted to show with my own story as a surgeon, like as a somewhat of a semi autobiographical or memoir type narrative in which I brought readers into the operating room to show what it's like to actually save sight, to perhaps more interestingly come up against a complication you're not sure what to do, or to fail, to be honest. And I'm sure that um, honesty about what it's like to be a surgeon is a main factor in why it was successful. I was gratified to see it was an Amazon bestseller for a while, and that was very nice. And I still get emails from people, honestly, all over the world who appreciated the book or say that it inspired them to go into ophthalmology or to go to medical school. So that's very nice. I'll give you one example of a great story, just so you can get a taste of how cool these stories are. So all of us are going to eventually get cataract surgery someday. A cataract is a clouding of the lens in the front of the eye, and it gets dense and makes your vision cloudy. And usually, if you live long enough, everyone's going to get cataract surgery, which is a very elegant procedure, which takes literally minutes now. And surgeons take out the cataract and put in what's called an artificial lens. And they're so good now that honestly, most people don't even need glasses anymore to see at distance. Well, the guy who invented the artificial lens was a World War II ophthalmologist who happened to be on duty during the Battle of Britain in 1940. And his name was Harold Ridley. And he happened to examine a British pilot who had been shot down. And the German bullets had shattered his plexiglass canopy, and shards of plexiglass had gone into his eyes. And it was a horrible injury. And he was blinded, and the doctor evaluated him, and he noticed something very peculiar. He noticed these little shards of plexiglass were actually inert in the eye. By inert, it means there's no inflammation or infection, which are the things you'd expect with any foreign body, especially one introduced in a combat situation. So he noticed the plexiglass was in there, and he gave him the idea, right now we take out cataracts and we don't put anything back. We just, have people wear really thick, what we call Coke bottle glasses to provide some vision, but it's not very good vision because the glasses are very distorting. What if I invented an artificial lens using this plexiglass material, which the eye won't reject because I can see it in this pilot? And he did it, and it was great. And because of that, even though it was a very long slog, he was labeled a heretic and ostracized because people didn't like his newfangled idea. He really persevered. Now we all benefit from it. So that's just one example of serendipity and perseverance that's in the book. So again, I wrote it for the general public. And I think that it's very interesting to kind of see how we got to the point where we are today. Because, ophthalmology is a great field. We can do so many cool things. We get to take out cataracts in minutes. We do LASIK surgery, which yields 20/20 glasses-free vision very quickly. Retina surgeons have even implanted retinal microchips to give blind patients some rudimentary sight. And we even have a treatment that's a kind of a gene therapy for a rare form of blindness now. So it's a very exciting field. I'm really lucky that I got to go into it.
No, I'm happy for you. And the story is absolutely fascinating and awesome. I'm hoping that our readers do get a chance to read your book. I definitely know I'm going to get a chance to read it myself. And for the last question, what are some tips you can offer our audience on how to take better care of their eyes and avoid problems, especially later in life as they get older?
Excellent question. I think the best advice is to make sure you see an eye doctor at least annually. Especially, you're right, as we get older, this becomes more and more important. Only an eye doctor and an eye exam can determine if a problem you're having, like blurry vision, is something simple, like a need for new glasses, or something much more serious, like a cataract, a retinal detachment, a macular hole, uveitis, and there are some conditions that don't cause sight problems or discomfort early on. For example, glaucoma. Glaucoma is a condition of a high eye pressure, but you don't really feel a high eye pressure most of the time. And only an eye care provider can check that. But if you leave it in its late stages, it causes vision loss that can be very bad, and it's not reversible. So you want to catch it early. You really don't want that to sneak up on you. And honestly, if you just catch it, then most of the time it's as simple as using eye drops to control it and lower the eye pressure. So That's my best advice. And another thing is, because I've seen so many things, so many accidents, I would really encourage people to use eye protection anytime there's any situation in which a projectile might be a part of it. For example, if you're mowing your lawn, if you're weed whacking, if you're um, doing anything where something could come out of the air and strike you in the eye, you got to wear protection. I mean, I've seen horrible things like fish hooks, bungee cords, paintballs. So I think people really need to be careful. You never know what can happen to you, but our eyes are very vulnerable. And you definitely, once they're injured, it's very hard to bring it back to the way it was. You know what I'm saying? Wear eye protection.
I think that's a good lesson for anyone.
Definitely. Definitely.
Well, thank you for coming on. I
Sure.
hope to see you again soon on this show. So thank you.
Thank you.